Oh, I wish you hadn't said short. It's a 38-pager. Rivals War and Peace. So the passage, actually might take longer to read the passage than the sermon, is Matthew 13. For many of this will be a very familiar passage, and that's the point. You'll get it in a bit, I hope. Matthew 13, 1 through 9, and then skipping ahead to verse 18, the parable of the sower. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down. And the whole crowd stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what's sown in the heart. This is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. When I were a lad, not much older than some of these kids here, me da went out. Now that was terrible. That was some sort of weird West Country UK accent or something. Did you hear that accent? I'm going to start over. Now listen. When I was a boy growing up on the farm back in Ontario, just miles away from where we're moving back, I went out into the field with my dad one day in the late spring. And the fields of our 110-acre farm were deep black loam with a few patches of light clay. Beautiful, beautiful soil. What agrologists would call friable. Now, I don't know why you'd want to fry soil, but that's what they call it. And it means it's fertile and crumbly in texture, full of organic matter. And my dad had tilled the field earlier that spring, disking and then harrowing the soil until it was laid out like a black blanket. No big lumps, as though your cat's hiding under the duvet. And then it was time to sow. But that day he didn't get out the seed drill. He didn't get out a corn planter. He didn't even bother with a tractor. It was just the two of us, a bag of seed and some odd-looking contraption. Now, this thing had a bag to which was attached a board shaped a little bit like a number 8, and sticking out of the side of the board was a crank attached to a wheel. And he filled the bag with seed and then slung the whole thing over his shoulder by a strap, grasped the crank, and started walking, cranking as he did so. And as he cranked, the wheel spun, and seed dribbled out of the bag, the bottom of the bag, through a hole onto the wheel, where it was flung out by centrifugal force onto the field. And we walked up and down, and up and down, and up and down, and up and down, and up and down, stopping only to refill the bag. And when we were done, he looked down at me and he said, "That is how you sow a field with a broadcast spreader, boy." Now, I wasn't listening. I think that's what he said anyway, because I wasn't listening. I was tired, and I was thirsty, and I was hungry, and I wondered what cartoons were on TV at that very moment. Jesus' parable of the sower, better titled, I think, Parable of the Soils, is one of those stories many of us have heard. So often, we don't really hear it anymore. It's so familiar, so much part of the fabric of our religious lives and formation, that it's like old wallpaper, two-dimensional, faded, the pattern so worn as barely to be discernible. And when we listen to the words of Jesus' oh so familiar parable, we aren't really hearing it. We're already skipping ahead to the next lines of the explanation that he gives later. Or maybe we're thinking about what's for lunch. I don't know what's for lunch. Why did I say that? Now you're thinking about lunch. The parable of the soils, we think, wow, that's as plain as dirt. Ha! I made it funny. And our thoughts go chasing after butterflies. But if we don't really hear it, we're much like those who heard it for the first time on that beach 2,000 years ago, sitting on the shore, the sun beating down on their heads, stomachs rumbling, kids quarreling. "Jacob punched me." "I did not." "Did too." "Shh, I can't hear what Jesus is saying." Listen. Attention fading in and out like an old radio. We get distracted, we don't hear, we don't listen. We don't absorb it and let it grow like seed planted in good soil. And too often, the words of Jesus fall on our ears and they're snatched away like a seagull pecking at a discarded French fry in a parking lot. The word doesn't even have a chance to grow because things peck away at our attention. What's for lunch? What will the doctor say on Tuesday? Why haven't I heard from my daughter in a month? Life distracts us. The challenges of life disturb us. And Satan uses that to our misfortune. We can't focus, we can't hear, the seed falls on the well-trodden, packed-down soil of our heart and can't penetrate and is snatched away. And if we hear the cawing and croaking of the birds pecking at our attention span, we can't hear because our hearts are as hard as some baked clay. You know, near where I grew up, that farm I mentioned to you in southern Ontario, in the Niagara Peninsula. Now I tell people, we're moving back to the Niagara Peninsula, and the immediate response is, "Oh, that's nice." Oh, no. You're thinking Niagara Falls, the Niagara Parkway, the Beamsville Bench, wineries and orchards, and so quaint and lovely. No, we're from the depressed part. It's a town of 6,000, 7,000. Hasn't really grown since we moved away 30 years ago, whatever it was. Has not really changed. It's changed a little bit, but more in slight infinitesimal degrees. And near that farm, or near where we grew up, I should say, just to the west, there's this band of sticky, gluey soil. It's called Haldeman clay. It's named after the county through which it runs, like a slash, miles and miles, slash through miles of farmland, like it was applied by a drunken painter. Well, my uncle's farm, my father's sister's and her husband, their farm, was just a few miles, maybe 3 miles southwest of us. Not very far at all, more south-southwest, if you want to be particular. And it was affected by this Haldeman clay. So while we're out plowing in the spring, he's still waiting for his fields to dry because clay stays wet longer. And as he always said, if you get out on that soil too early, you get out on that clay too early, you're just going to churn her up and it turns into rock. And sometimes the words of Jesus fall on our ears. Initially, we're intrigued, thoughtful. We turn them over in our minds like a plowed furrow, but then the soil of our minds hardens for some reason. The challenge is too much, the words too cutting, too dramatic, too hard to hear. As one commentator wrote about rocky, hard soil, the word sweeps the listener away with its own impressions, but then later the world sweeps these same persons away by its more overwhelming impressions. These hearers lack the deep hearing the word seeks. It's as though God is saying to us, can you hear me now? Can you hear me over the cacophony of life, over the distractions, over the static? And if you can hear me, are you truly listening? If you can't, perhaps it's due to the choking cares and concerns of life in the world. Choked listening, as one author put it, is listening absorbed with other interests and concerns, perhaps quite often legitimate interests and concerns. Great and serious issues take center. The word gradually takes what's left, and the result is choked seed. Again, disciples are warned lest anything other than the word of Jesus take center in our lives. Jesus himself, in explaining his parable, spoke of the thorns that choke out the word as being the cares of life and the deceitfulness of wealth. Well, if anything can distract us from the gospel in the way of Christ, it's money. Jesus himself said, you cannot serve two masters, implying money can certainly demand our allegiance so strongly, more strongly than God himself. Well, these distractions can be insidious and subtle. As the author says, they may be legitimate, but are they the source of life? The word of Christ must always be our focal point, the way, the truth, the life. Only when our lives are focused on Jesus Christ will we flourish like a seed planted in fertile soil that bears a bumper crop. And so how does Jesus end this parable? With the words, he who has ears, let him hear. And if we hear this parable and think, well, that was a nice story. I sure like the way Jesus tells stories. They're so earthy and approachable. Well, let me say this and hear it. We've not heard it. We have not been listening. We'd be like someone listening in rapt attention to a radio thinking, what a highly complex and modulated signal this is, when we're hearing nothing but static. How deaf we'd be to the true beauty and joy just the turn of a dial away. Listen, hear the word of God, the beauty of its soaring song, the multi-layered complexity and hard-to-interpret flourishes, the discordant chiming and the crashing crescendos, the simple tune, and the symphony of such wonder and majesty, it makes your heart sing and your soul melt. Can you hear it? Can you hear God whispering? Can you hear him shouting from the rooftops and the mountains? Can you hear him in the stillness of the night? Are you listening? Amen.